Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are talking about week 6 of the Planetary qualifiers for set 3. So I'm finally back home, so I'm looking forward to play in my upcoming Planetary qualifiers this weekend. But before that, we got a bunch of Planetary qualifiers to talk about. And we'll talk about kind of the big trend in terms of meta games, and but we have loads of interesting lists to go through today. So without further ado, let's start here by PQ Brisbane in Australia. I believe that's the Australian flag, yeah. In the results here, nothing particularly crazy. I mean, we got an Obi-Wan blue, which is nice. Also has a Quinlan blue, so definitely a meta that is kind of all over the place in terms of like results. It is a fairly small Planetary qualifier, so obviously whenever you talk about small tournaments, in those kind of tournaments, always anything can happen. But with that being said, there's still some interesting thing to learn. So just gonna take a look at the winners list here. This is a Han yellow list here, and I think biggest changes is basically playing almost no 2-drops. He's not playing RC-37, he's not playing Crafty Smuggler, he's playing the R2D2 instead. Only one copy of Body Rook in the main deck, and instead he's preferred to play Ezra in the deck instead. And then he's also playing some Chancellor Palpatine, which is something that I've tried in yellow before, and I have not been particularly impressed by the card. The problem is, like, obviously the ability only triggers if a unit has left to play this turn, which makes the ability very difficult to use. If it was just an ability that would always work, like you attack, you get a 2/2 on top of the 2/6 body, I think that would be a pretty decent card. The problem is it only triggers whenever a unit left to play, which is not always the case. He also plays a full package of Zori Bliss, which is also very curious. Zori Bliss is a good kind of like backup solution whenever Han dies, to be able to get this as a 4/7 from Smuggle 6. But it's not something that you would always want to have, as it is a 5-drop with no immediate impact on the game, which usually are not really what you want to play. With that being said, I have to say that the 7 health on Zori Bliss has been a blessing, because it's really like when people play against Han, they really try to play around this kind of the 6 HP breakpoint, and having a unit that has a 7 HP breakpoint actually is pretty relevant. So I've been liking this card. I just don't think you should be playing as a 3 ofs. The rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. Another interesting deck from this tournament is the second place with this Iden yellow, which is personally an archetype that I've been experimenting with, and I think it's a pretty strong hard control deck. We've seen a lot of different kind of hard control in yellow. We've seen some more kind of unit-based versions playing either Django or even Cad Bane. I think if you really want to play hard control based on yellow, blue, black, I think Iden Versio is a very good option in my opinion. What I really like about this particular list, I mean, the list is pretty much what you would expect from a hard control yellow base. You get the Bounty Hunter crew to crush the mirror. You get the Enticing Reward, which is a great card advantage engine. A bit surprised to not see the Bazin in the main deck, but why not? And he's also playing 2 cards I really love, is 2 copies of Bounty Posting. And Bounty Posting is really great in this deck because you basically, so you pay 1, you search in your deck for a Bounty upgrade, and you draw it, and you may play this upgrade bounty, and then you may play immediately that upgrade bounty. You have to pay the cost. So basically, it's kind of like you're paying two resources instead of 1 for your 2 bounties that you have in your deck, but you get to choose which one you want. And obviously, depending on the matchup, you either want to have Enticing Reward or Top Target. Enticing Reward is basically the equivalent of Deathmark for Bosk, if you're playing Bosk Red, and Top Target is obviously great against all those sort of aggro decks. And the ability to have like this flexible bounty card that can search either of those cards is very strong. It's a card that I would 100% play in Bosk if it was not if I didn't have to pay the aspect penalty. So it's a really clever piece of tech here in this deck. In the sideboard, we also see some calculated lethality, which makes sense in the current meta. There's a lot of units that have there's a lot of upgrades, first of all, with DR44 blasters, and also a lot of people playing shielded units. So calculated lethality can be quite good. The problem with it is that often you don't really get the experience token from it, because you don't actually have a unit in play, because this kind of deck plays very few units. So I wonder how often he actually got the experience from it, and if that is really worth the trouble to play this card. You can see a lot of tech for the mirror match here. 2 additional restocks. Like, this guy is never losing a mirror match ever. And I think this is completely overkill. I don't think you need... If you're playing 3 Bazine, 3 Bounty Hunter Crew, and a restock, and plus the intersect reward, which are great at searching for either vigilance or restock, you don't need the 2 extra copies of restock, in my opinion. But yeah, very solid deck. I like the deck a lot. And another deck I wanted to talk about is this Cad Bane yellow deck. So something that we noticed with Cad Bane is like whenever you're building a Cad Bane deck, you realize that actually the only real red card you're playing in Cad Bane is going to be Ruthless Raider. Other than that, you're basically not playing anything red. The only reason why you really want to play red is because it gives you access to Tarkentown, which is incredibly powerful in Cad Bane. With that being said, turning your Tarkentown into a 30 HP base will give you a better matchup against aggro, as gives you, not necessarily against aggro, but it will give you 5 extra HP, which is relevant, and it also will allow you to get access to Cunning. So in my opinion, I don't think Tarkentown is an auto-include in Cad Bane. I think you can play yellow in Cad Bane, and it is a perfectly acceptable alternative. You get 5 extra HP on your base. Yes, you're missing out on a super strong ability, but you're getting 5 extra HP base, and you get to play all those double Cunning cards, which are very powerful. Cunning is one of them. He's also playing a new adventure in there. So, in my opinion, and that's, in my opinion, quite worth it. Just Cunning by itself is, in my opinion, one of the strongest cards in the game. He's not playing Cantina Bouncer, though. I think the reason why he's not playing Cantina Bouncer is because Cantina Bouncer is not an underworld, which is quite anti-synergistic with this deck. Other than this, it's pretty much what you would expect from a Cad Bane here. With the Enfys Nest is starting to become more and more popular. It does reach the breakpoint of 6. Would you rather be playing Syndicate Lackeys instead? I think Syndicate Lackeys is not Underworld, if I'm not mistaken. If it is Underworld. Yeah, never mind. So yeah, Enfys Nest instead of Syndicate Lackeys, you can argue for or against. It's a choice, but I think it's a viable choice. So I like this deck a lot. Moving on, there's a Quinlan blue. So remember we saw like the Han blue, the Han blue deck that Ylsera was playing. Was very based on the Republic units. This is kind of the same idea, but with playing Quinlan instead of Han, and you really try to emphasize on now there's 2 of them combo, playing a lot of cards from the new set in this particular deck. Try to cheat and play a Plo Koon or a Kia di Mundi. Or even something bigger like a Luke Skywalker or an Obi-Wan. Works with both the 4th and the Republic cards. We also plays the Ahsoka Tano, which is starting to become a little bit better. We've seen like those Django players who really try to go wide early on in the game with the Greedo, the Stormtroopers, and even the 2 ones that can bounce on the upgrade. I forgot the name. So they really try to get wide early on in the game. So Ahsoka Tano can be really strong in those matchups. So Ahsoka is kind of like, in my opinion, there's a good reason to play Ahsoka in the current meta, even though it's still going to be quite niche, and obviously the 3/4 stat line, not the best against Pink plus Tarkentown. That's why people prefer usually to play Liberate Slave. But in this case, Jedi means you can, Force means you can synergize with the 4th with me and the Jedi's lightsaber, and obviously the Republic trait allows him to combine with, now there's 2 of them, so there's good reason here to be playing Ahsoka. So that's basically it for this top 8 here. It's a fairly small tournament, so take everything you see with a grain of salt, but it is a kind of a cool, very, very diverse top 8, which we always like to see, even though the Han yellow takes the cake in the end. Also, would have loved to see that the Obi-Wan blue list. Unfortunately, we don't get to see it. Then we got the PQ Victoria Park, an even smaller PQ with only 31 players. On this one, pretty, I would say, usual meta. We got to see a Thrawn blue here getting himself. I don't know if it's a control or if it's a mid-range version. Would have liked to know that, but then the rest is pretty much what you would expect. A fairly standard top 8 here for the current meta that we're in. Then we got a PQ Manchester, which has reached 100 player, which is significant. And this one, we got an Asajj Tarkentown here at the bottom, which is really cool. The rest is pretty meta, I would say. To get a Cad Bane, get some Django. Like to see Cad Bane making some results. it was pretty popular during Birmingham, and then it was then very popular during the very first PQ of the season, and then it kind of fell off in popularity, and now we're seeing more Cad Bane recently, which is nice. So I like to see that. Then we got the PQ Krakow, and as usual, our Polish players do not disappoint with attendance, 106 players. And here we got a very interesting, so this time it's dominated by Han, 3 Han yellow and 1 Han red, a couple of Quinlan red and a Sabine green. So not a very diverse top 8, but we see an Asajj talking down. So here we also do have the stats of the attendance, and what is very interesting is that the most played deck of the tournament was by far Django Takintan's 21 decks. Han 1 Yellow was actually only 11 decks, so actually Han 1 Yellow really overperformed. And a lot of believe that Han 1 Yellow has a pretty bad matchup against Django, and this seems to be saying otherwise, because you can see here strong attendance on Django Takintown, most represented deck in the game, and none of them makes top 8. So that's a very interesting piece of data here. When you get to see the top 8 versus the attendance, that tells you like a bit more about kind of how the different decks perform. Also interesting, you see the Bosk here, the 8 Bosk being played, but if you look at it, there's actually only one of them that was a Bosk blue, the other one were a Bosk green. Then there was also a Bosk ECL and a Bosk yellow. Okay. But yeah, so only one of them being Bosk Blue. So Bosk Blue really underplayed in this tournament, for example. So that's some interesting piece of info here. Definitely the meta try to fight Han Yellow, and Han Yellow still came out on top here in this tournament, which is interesting. Obviously we don't get the full info, but that is definitely an important piece of information. And here I just wanted to take a look at the list of Asajj Red, the Asajj Takintan, which is the one that did top 8. And this is pretty much the list that we've been seeing, which is kind of like similar to a Django Red, but that plays a lot of separatist cards in order to trigger the Vanguard Droid Bomber, which I think is a great card in my opinion. The only problem with this card is that the separatist card is just not that good. But here, if you're playing OM Series Officer, which is a decent card, and then this one alongside each other, and you're also playing your leader, then you get plus the Elite P38. You get enough separatists that you can make that work, and you're also playing on your doorstep, which is great with Asajj. So you basically have a very aggressive, kind of a more aggressive version of Django. It's don't be fooled. It's very much like a Django deck, but just play slightly different cards. Doesn't a bit more aggressive, bit less ability to control what the opponent does, because one of the great quality of Django is obviously the ability to tap down the enemy units. Asajj is a bit more aggressive that by giving attack bonus to your units, but the flip turn can be quite good in getting very far ahead on the board, combined with attacking town. This deck is really good at getting far ahead early on in the game. He's also playing two copies of Political Pressure, which you like to see. Definitely a card that I don't know if you would see competitive play. I like to see this card seeing a little bit of competitive play. Yeah, moving on now to so this is okay, moving on to the PQ Sweden. Fairly small PQ, and the number one player is none other than I Am So Humble, which is one of my mates for actually training Star Wars Limited. A very good player, and he was playing his Han Yellow deck, and there's a couple of very interesting cards in this deck. He's playing Old on Blaster, which oh my god, that's not the list he sent me. I'm actually confused now. Okay, yeah, he's playing Old on the Blaster. I don't even know why he's playing this, so I need to ask him. The Chewbacca is for the Django matchup. If Django has a tendency to go very wide early in the game. I mean, Chewbacca, not really exactly early game unit, but if you can get to play him, you can get to play him. You can definitely block the board on the ground very well, as it will trade positively with almost anything, and as he gets damaged. If the Tarkintan is already being used, then it becomes very difficult for the Django to get rid of very large Sentinels. And the ability of the Sentinels to, whenever it gets damaged, to basically ready and attacks means that Chewbacca is really good at punishing decks that will kill Chewbacca in a few strike and not in one go. Which Django, basically, once you've used Tarkentown, it's very difficult for the Django deck to actually prevent. It's actually very difficult to kill Django to kill Chewbacca in one go, and you have to use different instances of damage to be able to. And Chewbacca really loved that. So that's the kind of the originality of the list here. The whole lot of the blasters is I feel like he changed his deck because he used to be playing something else. Anyway, not sure why this is here. He'll probably be able to answer that in the comments if he watched this video. The rest of the list is pretty much what you would expect, and you'll be ready to move on to so the rest of the tournament is pretty much classic meta. Lots of Anakin Blue. I know Anakin Blue is very popular in the northern countries. And then we got PQ Minneapolis, 112 players, a big PQ here. Unfortunately, we don't have any deck list. The meta, though, is pretty much classic. We see a Krennic ACL and a Kira ACL doing well. And we also see a Yoda Green in the top 8, which is nice to see. I think Yoda is definitely a strong leader that is a little bit underplayed, so I love to see him making some results. And the rest is pretty much what you would expect. Coming down, we got PQ El Paso, Texas, 23 player, very, very, very small PQ with a Maul ACL taking the win here, which is cool. But it's a very small tournament, so you really can't draw any conclusion here on this one. Then we got PQ Salt Lake City, 74 players, 3 Djangos in this one, 3 Sabines, not a very diverse meta. And once again, a Cad Bane gets to sneak in there. Then we got a PQ New Jersey with a surprise win with a Cad Bane Green. Cad Bane Green is not an archetype that is on my radar, I think, but it is I would say a deck that, at least this version of the deck, should do very well against Han, because it's the kind of deck where it doesn't have a crazy late game, but it does have just a slightly better late game than Han Yellow. So even whenever you are playing two decks, that's a 2 mid-range deck that fight against each other, usually the slowest deck wins. And I think Cad Bane, just this version of Cad Bane here with the 3 copies of Cad Bane, the 3 copies of Maul, the 2 copies of Reinforcement Worker, just have like slightly better late game than the Han Yellow, which makes it favorable. And then another cool thing about this version is like this deck has so many ways to kill 5 health units and 6 health units, the 2 important breakpoints. Because if you want to kill anything that has 5 health, you can go 4 LOM, Bosk, that will kill anything that has 5 health combined with the Cad Bane's ability. And then obviously, if for anything that has 6 health, you can just Syndicate Lackeys plus Cad Bane and Fizness plus Cad Bane. So a lot of ways, very, very cumbersome on the 4-5 curve, but this can be kind of dealt with by using, now there's 2 of them. So a deck is definitely designed to beat Han Yellow, I would say. I don't think the deck I feel like the deck plays too many ambush to be good against. I'm afraid the deck like this would be very weak against Django. Like against Django, your only hope of victory is just to pull up a Cad Bane, basically. Which is definitely a problem. Also, this is not a great deck against Heart Control, but against Han, this deck is very, very strong in my opinion. Only 2 copies of Overwhelming Barrage in my opinion is wrong. I think Overwhelming Barrage is too good of a card to not be played with 3 of, especially in the deck like this. But okay, there's a clunky obviously, and yeah. So the green gives you access to a lot of powerful cards. You get to ramp a little bit, which is nice. So yeah, this deck is definitely it's designed to beat Han, and I think it does it very well. The main deck is not really good against Heart Control, but the sideboard, however, is very strong against Papason's Returns, and the Relentless package is one of the advantages of playing green. Obviously, you get access to this super bad package. I will be afraid fighting against Django, but against anything else, I think this deck is very solid. Okay, so moving. Oh yeah, there's also a Fennec Tarkentown in there that I wanted to take a look at. So interesting deck building decisions here in this deck. For example, he's playing 3 copies of Bamboozle in the main deck. That is crazy. That is crazy to see. The rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect here for a Fennec deck, and I like to see this one doing some result. I think yellow, red, white has been a very, very popular color combination. I think the reason is basically in set 2, and also was true in set 1, heroism red has been the strongest heroism colors by far. And basically, especially after Shadows of the Twilight of the Republic, yellow white has become super popular. So this color combination is just crazy good at the moment. And Fennec is a very underplayed leader in my opinion. It's a really good leader, played by a good, if it's piloted by a good player. Okay, next we got the PQ Quebec with 66 players. That's and we got a pretty classic top 8 here in terms of result, nothing too surprising. I just want to take a look here at the Sabine list that won the tournament here. It's interesting because it plays General's Blade alongside Dark Sabers, which is something that it's not the first time I see that. It's a kind of a new trend here from the Sabine players to really kind of use and abuse those upgrades, and that can be very strong in the mirror match. And it's very strong against Han Yellow, because Han Yellow does not really have great of an answer. Whenever you go Sabine and you put a big upgrade on her, there's not really much the Han Yellow can do about this, unless he plays Bamboozle. So that's something that is really cool. However, it's probably not very good against Django, that specific interaction here. But he also plays the Sunday Peacekeeper in the deck, of course, because we're in a very aggro meta, so that makes sense. And also plays the Daring Raid in the main deck, and he's not playing for a cause I believe in, he's playing them in a sideboard. That's because he plays too many non-heroism cards in his main deck, and I believe he's probably sending out some of the non-heroism cards. Is it worth it to do that? I don't know. Once again, it's a small tournament, so you can't really draw too many conclusions, but it is definitely an interesting approach. Then we got a PQ Alaska, 11 players. I think this is the smallest PQ that we've ever had. Coming from Alaska, I'm not really surprised. In one hand, I think that 11 player PQs are a bit of a joke. In the meantime, I'm kind of glad that Alaska is getting something, so then there's something to play here for the players there. But I'm sure this is, once again, it's probably going to be calibrated by FFG. They're going to be kind of trying to see where the community are, and from that point, they will be ready to make a call on where next time to place a PQ or not in certain areas. But yeah, 11 players for PQ is definitely not enough. I don't necessarily think that every PQ needs to be 100 players, and I think that as we're going to be rolling in with the regional qualifiers and the sector qualifiers, definitely PQs are going to take more of a secondary role. I think that right now people are really regarding the PQ as the pinnacle of competitive play for Star Wars Unlimited, but in my opinion, it's not really what it's supposed to be at all. And we're definitely going to see basically 60-ish player PQs is definitely going to become more the norm in the long run. And we're going to see those sectoral qualifiers and becoming the tournaments that are going to have like 100, 200, 300 players is probably what's going to happen. Then we got the PQ Tour in France, 128 players, that's the maximum capacity. And a very unusual for the French meta is that we don't see a single Han Yellow in this top 8, and a lot of very interesting lists. So the one I want to unfortunately the lists are kind of like listed by hand and in French, so it doesn't make easy to read. But here's some interesting stuff. Some Gar Saxon, very diverse top 8, as you can see. 2 Sabine, a Bosk, yeah, pretty much just a little bit of everything. That's really cool to see, everything except in Han, which is really cool to see. Then we got the PQ Vienna, and in the PQ Vienna there's a list that is probably the last leader, and with the last base you would ever expect to make a top 8 performance in the PQ, and it's not a small PQ. 79 players is a pretty decently sized PQ. So I just want to take a look at this list because it is absolutely wild to see this happening. So obviously IG88 likes to play wide. So Joint Manufacturer is kind of a great combination with IG88, as IG88 does deploy relatively early and does give you bonuses for things, for having unit in play. Granted, you can actually keep IG88 keep alive. The problem is that IG88 is so easy to kill that you really don't get the benefit of having a red one bonus most of the time. So then we got Desla Stormtrooper, Guardian Antagonist, so a bunch of basically turn 1 plays. Cunning Officer as obviously an anti-Han tech. Snowtrooper Lieutenant is obviously great. General Taggy, yeah, bunch of troopers, why not? Season Short Trooper, First Legion Short Trooper, Admiral Ozol as well, General Vias, a tons of just to try to get super wide, play super wide aggro. That is very, very interesting. Grim of Tarkins to kind of get some cards back into hand. It's very Imperial based. And then we got Vader still in late game. Vader for the late game. Ruthless Raiders, some Barrage, Palpatine's Baton in the main deck, and also play some Resupply. Interesting. Resupplies allows you to play IG-88 on turn 3, which is nice. Some Dairy Ranks and Traitorous. Very, very interesting deck. Yeah, not much to say about it. It's just a crazy deck. I don't think this is a very powerful deck, but it's nice to see this doing some performance. And I would have loved to see, if you want to see this deck in action, there's a video down here. So I'm probably gonna watch this later to see if we can see this deck in action and see how it operates. But cool to see, because most of his cards, as you can see, is like this deck. Most of the cards are set 1 cards, guys. Like, it's just set 1 stuff for the most part. So it's nothing new to us. Like, we've seen people trying this kind of deck many times in the past, but maybe Droid Manufactory is like enough of a buff to make the deck kind of cool. So I like to play it and see how it goes. Then we got the PQ Firenze in Italy. We got another Gar Saxon making a performance here. The rest is pretty much what we expect. So Han Green top 1, Queen Tarkentown, Sabine ECL, 3 Quinlan actually in this one, and 1 Quinlan Green, which we've seen many times. I think this deck is very weak to control, but against everything else, it's a very solid archetype. And I want to take a look at this Gar Saxon list. It's pretty much what we've seen from the Gar Saxon. Lots of early game units. The unit that have shielded, obviously, that they benefit from the +1 attack bonus right away. The snapshot reflexes, Ultra DR44 blasters. He also plays McClunky. I'm not a big fan of McClunky in Gar Saxon, because you're trying to play aggressive and having to bounce your own unit in order to make it happen. It's kind of annoying. However, it is kind of important for Dr. Evazan. The thing is, like, Dr. Evazan is an insane turn 1 play. You get the 4/3 shielded. But then later on in the game, if he gets killed, it's such a big swing for your opponent. So what you like to do is you actually play a Dr. Evazan early on, you attack, be super aggressive, and then when at the moment when you think that Evazan is likely to be killed, you can play McClunky, get it back into hand, so your opponent doesn't get the benefit from it. So that's kind of like the why he's playing McClunky, I feel like. And then the rest is pretty much what you would expect from a Gar Saxon deck. I think Gar Saxon are gonna get Gar Saxon as a leader is going to get much better with set 2, with set 4. Sorry, there's tons of great cards in set 4 for the Gar Saxon deck. So I'm really excited to see this deck evolve with the new set and how it performs. Yeah, so 53 players, a very small PQ, but nice to see the Italians still at it. And in PQ Jacksonville, 64 players, a Boss Blue, an Anakin Blue, 2 Django Tides, so very relatively diverse meta. Boss Green taking the win, and a very bosky, 3 Bosk in the top 8 here actually, so very bosky top 8 here. And then PQ Louisville, which have a lot of interesting decks here. So it's 58 players, a fairly small PQ, but we have a Tarkin Blue deck, which I don't think I've ever seen a Tarkin Blue decks making a performance in competitive Star Wars Limited, so we're gonna see what it's all about. So as you can see, this is pretty much a classic Kira/Krennic soft control list. It plays like tons of late game, even the Super Laser Blast, the ramp, obviously the ramp package, and tons of removal. So it's pretty much you would replace Tarkins by a Krennic or Kira. It wouldn't shock me at all. Obviously, there's a few hints that this is attacking decks. Obviously, playing the TIE Fighters. For example, that kind of thing. But for the most part, you could just simply swap this deck with another deck, and it would just basically be the same story. So that is kind of interesting. So, in my opinion, you can you can't do this with any leader, but you can do this with like a lot of archetypes where you take like a very popular archetype. Like for example, you take you basically try to take like a color combination is very popular, and instead of playing the leaders that everybody plays, you play another leader instead. And if you do that, most likely you're gonna end up with a deck that is suboptimal, but you're not gonna end up with a bad deck. Like especially if the leader you pick to replace is not so bad. So in my opinion, playing Ram of Tarkin over playing the traditional Palpatine blue or Krennic blue or Quinlan green, it's gonna be suboptimal. I cannot imagine Tarkin being the better choice for that kind of deck. I'm gonna be 100% honest. However, I don't think it makes the decks that much worse, especially since he's making some adjustment in order to make Tarkin quite good. One thing that I like about Tarkin though is that his ability definitely gets better the longer the game goes, because the longer the game goes, the more you get a resource to spare, and whenever you are in late game situation and you're able to use the ability every single turn, it becomes more impactful. So in terms of super late game situation, the ability is actually way more useful than the one of Krennic, for example. But obviously Krennic is, in my opinion, a far better leader in the early stage of the game in order to survive. So that's kind of like the idea. And Kira, on the other hand, is more kind of like... Kira, I think the reason why people have been preferring Kira is because at the same time, she's kind of good at stabilizing. With her entering battlefield, she can really allow you to kill very large targets. And in the meantime, she's kind of a great way to... she's also very strong in late game, as being able to give shield to your stuff left and right is very strong. We're seeing once again calculating lethality in the sideboard. And in this deck, it makes a lot more sense because you do play quite a few units. So being able to give a +1/+1 to those units is quite valuable, especially when you can stack it up with more +1/+1 counters coming from the Tarkin himself. All the list on this topic that are interesting, obviously, is the Mace Windu, the Bo-Katan. And obviously, Bo-Katan is the deck you are after trying to play the Mandalorian, and this is a Mandalorian deck, basically. This is kind of a... I played against this deck, and I don't think very highly of it. I think it's pretty bad. It's very slow. It's pretty weak against control. It's not very good. Things really need to line up very, very well for this deck to work, in my opinion. So I'm not a big fan of it, but outside of the Mandalorian, which I think are pretty weak, he does play some very strong cards. So yeah, I mean, fair play to him. And congratulations for making top 8. But yeah, as I said, I don't think the list is very good. I think the problem I have with Bo-Katan is the fact that she's kind of an aggro leader that does deploy on 6. The leader's ability is not that strong. And the Mandalorian synergies are not very powerful. It's kind of like there's just a lot of stuff that just don't work out, in my opinion. And that's it. That's basically it for the topic this season, for what we had. I forgot to mention the Alex Holmes Mace Blue. This is pretty much what we've seen before from the Mace Blue decks. Nice to see Stellar Guerra seeing some play. This one is seeing some play in the main deck here. Interesting to be able to fetch those pillage, those bombing runs. I like this quite a bit. A bombing run is so strong in combination with Mace Windu's deployment. But the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect from in this blue-white-red shell. So let's take a look at the evolution of the meta. And I think the big answer here is that the meta has not really evolved very much. Throughout this PQ season, we haven't seen massive trends, massive swings in terms of the top 4 decks. The top 5 decks actually has pretty much remained the same throughout the entirety of the season and in the same order. I think they basically just Quinlan's and Django, sometimes they swap around because they're very close to one another. But for the most part, basically the top 5, top 6 decks have been remaining the same ones. So this is something that has not really changed. The percentage of Han Yellow has gone down a little bit. We got 35%. We were 38 at some point, I think. And if we look at the leaders in top 8, we are currently sitting at 21% percent of Han in top 8, which is a little bit more than what I would want. But it's definitely not enough to justify a ban, especially at the dawn of the release of set 4, which is going to change absolutely everything. If you've seen my previous video, there's just so many incredibly powerful synergies in the set, and a lot of powerful leaders, a lot of powerful cards, a lot of powerful archetypes, which is really new, because the new set, even set 2, did not brought us a lot of strong cards, but didn't bring a lot of strong new archetypes. And really the main difference here with the set 4 is like it's not only going to bring new cards, it's also going to bring new archetypes, which is something that we really desperately needed. So I'm super excited about this, and I just think that it's nobody can tell which of those archetypes is going to come out on top after set 4. Maybe Han Yellow will persist and will remain a force to be reckoned with in the next meta. Maybe it's not. Like, the meta is going to be so different from anything we know. Even the basic fabric of the game is going to be changed by the fact that now we are basically kind of roaming on like 75% grind unit, 25% space, maybe like 66-33%, something like 2/3, 1/3 basically. The next set is going to change this to at least 50-50, if not reversed. That also could happen as well. And it's going to be wild because nowadays, like, Django is pretty much the only space deck. In set 4, there's going to be loads of space decks. So that's something that's going to completely change the way you play the game. So it's impossible to predict how the next meta is going to shape up. But this current meta is quite healthy. I wish Han Yellow Han was more around the 20% mark rather than 21. 21 is kind of like getting to a territory that I don't really like. But once again, it's just once again, you're gonna have 2 more weeks with this meta. The next meta is gonna be so different. It's kind of irrelevant to do any ban or nerf at this point, in my opinion. The rest of the meta, as you can see, very diverse. Of pretty much, it's just so many different decks that are playable, that can do performances in tournaments. Yellow is very powerful. Yeah, I've been a lot of people complaining about the prevalence of yellow in this meta, and I wanted to give a little bit of feedback about this. So something to understand is that as yellow is very strong, yellow is undeniably the strongest color in the game. I'm not denying this, and I think nobody can really deny this. Cunning in general is the strongest color in the game. No debate about that. I think this is due to the fact that Cunning was already very powerful in the previous sets, and set 4 basically did not give us anything good outside of good Cunning cards. If you take a look at what are the best cards in set 4, you got P38, that's Cunning Villainy. You got R2, it's Cunning Heroism. You got Quinlan, you got Plo Koon, Cunning Heroism. You got Enfys Nest, that's Cunning Heroism. So that's basically, those 4 cards are basically the best card of set 4. Or there's also Perilous Position, but yeah, pretty much like they just yellow is getting. We also have now there's 2 of them, which is probably the best legendary in the set. Also, yeah, Cad Bane also is the second best legendary in the set. But those 2 cards are among the best legendary in the set. So basically, yeah, I feel like yellow was kind of quite on par with the other colors in the previous sets, and then the set 4 really pushed Cunning to a new territory that basically is not healthy, which is not ideal, I would say. So is this going to continue or not? I mean, this is, once again, we only have the step back of one set where Cunning is just a little bit overrepresented. I mean, Cunning was also very powerful before, but that was mostly because of Boba, not necessarily because of Cunning itself, if that makes sense. So in previous set, it was really much the Boba's fault, while in this set, it feels really much like Cunning is really strong across the board, regardless of what archetype you're playing. And that's really something that is new, and it's related to the fact that Cunning got a lot of support in set 4, and basically set 4 brought nothing to the other colors. And I think that was really a big deal. But once again, this has to be nuanced. The second best deck in the game does not play Cunning. It's Sabine ECL, of course. Then we got, of course, Bosk Blue, Bosk Green. Don't play Anakin Blue. Those decks don't play Cunning. So that's something that has to be nuanced. So I don't necessarily think this is something that's going to continue, unless of course FFG continue to print a card that are exclusively good for cunning. But I think that was pretty much just an anomaly of set 4. I think set 4 which really did not really help the competitive meta very much. I think that, as I said, the diversity of this meta is mostly related to the ban of Boba, not necessarily by the new cards being introduced by set 4, which I think is a little bit of a shame. But luckily enough, we know for sure it's not going to be the case in set 4. There are just so many strong cards in that set, and I'm really much looking forward to see how the new meta is going to shape up. But in the meantime, there's going to be more PQs to be played, and hopefully you guys are having fun with this meta. And also, if you like that kind of video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time, probably for my spoiler analysis for this week. See you guys.